what I loved how strategically you integrated this pay-as-you-go strategy across the entire product and marketing and sales. One thing that you just highlighted, I think not that many people kind of understand, even if you succeed in pay-as-you-go, you still need to bridge that with enterprise sales if you want to unlock like a big numbers, right?
Yeah, big enterprise customers don't always buy that way today. They might start that way, but they may not buy that way. But also, I can tell you, we had Fortune 500 companies that started that way and wanted to stay that way. They didn't want to commit. They just wanted to be able to unplug at any time. But you'd see them spending 10, 20, 30 grand a month on our PayGo. And like, they're like, yeah, checks our box, team's happy.
Learn how to master cloud marketplaces in just 5 weeks with our cohort course. Accelerate your growth by tapping into the $300+ billion cloud spend that enterprises have committed to AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. Discover the future of go-to-market with Roman. During 10 weekly sessions, you'll learn how to leverage this fast-growing channel and network with top industry experts and partnership leaders. We will dive into marketplace strategies, internal buy-in, building relationships with the cloud, and mastering co-sell. Join our upcoming cohort.
I'm super excited today to have Michael Musselman in our show, and Michael Musselman doesn't need an introduction. So Michael Musselman, very well known in Alliance and cloud go-to-market circles. I think everyone who is being successful in AWS knows him. He's been leading alliances in companies like Astronomer. He built huge traction in Lacework, where he was VP in cloud technology alliances. He was early employee, built crazy traction, 700% year-over-year growth, built AWS to millions from zero. And he's been known by, again, everyone who has been in AWS. Today, I wanted to talk about the latest updates and trends that happening in cloud alliances, how AWS is becoming everything store for software. We'll talk about channel partners, we'll talk about PLG, startups, and everything else that is going on. So Michael, thanks so much for joining us today. So excited to have you.
Yeah, excited. Thank you for the intro. My ego is happy. My humility is like, nah, I got lucky. This stuff is really hard, but I like to learn and help others.
Amazing. So, and then I sort of like forgot to mention that you built your own like community, right? Like PCAN and former Caddyshack, and you've been doing other things, consulting and so on. So, okay, let's jump straight into it. I guess the most interesting topic that I found sort of really compelling is that we have two different trends that kind of like contradict each other in a way, maybe not. Would love your opinion. So first of all, we have this like just crazy amount of cloud commitments that we've been reporting. AWS has been the leader in the space, $189 billion, and it's been growing. At the same time, AWS now has changed their policies, and they opening up their marketplace to other software companies, and which means that if you're not built on AWS, you still can get listed. If you're on-prem, you also can get listed as well. But if you want to get benefit of your customers decrementing all of these cloud commitments, which has been historically like one of the biggest driver for marketplaces, you need to be deployed on AWS. So what's your take on this everything store strategy of AWS, and what is the evolution that you've seen?
Every once in a while, I get so deep into cloud and AWS that I forget that the A in AWS stands for the greatest marketplace and e-commerce platform that exists. So like, what does Amazon do? .com, as they like to call it internally, as a business? And you can imagine there's so much knowledge transfer, probably not as much as there could be, but between Amazon and AWS, and the marketplace is the commerce. So if you go back, I think it's 13 years ago when the marketplace was first designed, this was always part of the vision. It just takes a long time to build a marketplace. There's two sides of the equation. There's the buyers and the sellers. And I just think about this as today, you buy services through AWS. There's almost 300 services. And those services are, think of like Amazon.com. They're the Amazon basics, right? They're white labeled. They're their own services. But Amazon itself offers, third party, you can list your products and sell your products on this marketplace. And AWS, in my opinion, is getting closer to that and no different than that. However, you are correct that they've always had a loose policy that, whether it was for security or for, I'll use fancy words like an FTR or a WAR, like, foundational technical review or well architected review. If AWS is going to sell something to you, there has to be some kind of stamp of like, hey, this thing does what it says it does. It's going to probably help the customer. And they were loosely around it having to be built 100% on AWS versus, it's coming from a third party, kind of buy at your own risk. We have limited visibility. Maybe it's not built on our cloud. And so you can imagine that the benefits for those two cohorts also have to make sense with their business as well. So if you're built on AWS, you drive consumption in AWS, you've gone through the certifications and the checkboxes that your solution does what it says it does, it's built in AWS and their security and ISO frameworks, then hey, now you get the benefits of drawing down those really big commitments. And so they're just really looking at enforcing what they should have been doing kind of all along. But in order to build the marketplace, you need to convince buyers and sellers. And I don't think that point made a ton of sense until probably now, which is why they're implementing some of these policies.
Yeah. I think like obviously they built like a pretty strong flywheel now, right? Like I think it's like the famous like and also favorite AWS or like Amazon in general term about flywheel. And I think but I'm curious, like previously there was another hyperscaler, I guess Microsoft, that pushed everyone to drop like rates to 3%. And I'm curious, like, do you think this will tip the market in some sort of ways across different hyperscalers? Like, or it will change the roles? Will it have like a larger impact? What do you think?
It's a great question. So I think all of these are in business with each other to some degree, and they're going to get. So like, I'll go back to Amazon. What's eBay? Another marketplace. What's Etsy? Another marketplace. What's, like, you have to consider that features in one competitor show up in features in others. And they're always trying to compete with each other, either in those buyer or seller features, but also, whatever the benefit or whatever your North Star is to the customer outcome. So I think the plan is obviously to widen the aperture, but limit the benefits to the sellers. And honestly, over time, you can imagine a company's going to maybe make technology decisions. Google has always been very clear, you need to be built on Google Cloud in order to list in our marketplace. They would say maybe there's exceptions, but more so extensions. But they've always been very clear on that. Microsoft Azure has always had kind of this, like, you have to be built on Azure, you have to be consuming Azure. It wasn't always 100%. I think it was like 51%. But the point was, like, if you wanted to sell to their customers, get the benefits of these committed spends, you had to be driving back-end consumption in that cloud. So, opening the aperture, you could always, Azure is a good example, you could always list your product. It just wasn't transactable. And then some transactable products were going to decrement Mac and others weren't, right? Yeah. So I think this is a very similar, maybe you could just say AWS is like looking at that and saying, hey, this is what it's going to be. So I don't know if it's good or bad yet. I think that the jury's not out. I think we're in the mix of like, how do these benefits work? How does the sellers get compensated around this stuff? Is it good for the market? I think if you just put your perspective for a buyer, and now as an example, the AWS marketplace, you can see what's built on AWS, right? It'll start to probably have SEO implications. It'll probably have, like that consumption decrement, stuff. And so a smart buyer, a smart enterprise with a committed spend, a smart procurement team, they're probably, they may or may not make decisions based off this. At the end of the day, they have a problem. One of these providers has a solution. They're going to pick the thing that solves their problem. It just becomes another attribute about, well, should we get this one or that one? Well, this one helps us here, that one helps us there. But also the decrement against your commit isn't like an AWS service. It's not dollar for dollar. Well, I mean, it's not unlimited dollar for dollar. So because of that, to each commitment to, as the commitments get bigger, the more dollars you retire for another ISV solution also grow with that as well. I don't think the jury's out, but I do believe the other pieces of this, like extending the marketplace from the marketplace site. So the bigger thing for me was more the buy anywhere, right? So
Yeah.
taking the APIs from the marketplace, putting it on your own website, stuffing it in your product. Those are really powerful. That's the part that it wasn't just like, oh, we're going to let everyone in the marketplace. That was the little things that if you start thinking as a software company, I might have a customer, I might have released another module, I might do a promotion. Maybe the customers that have already bought through the marketplace, like, how do I lower my cost of sale? How do I lower the procurement friction? I think actually embedding buy with marketplace on your website, inside your product for feature, expansions or renewals without a whole lot of, I think that when you think of it from the business perspective, that's a really powerful thing that very few, if any, are even doing this today. But I think the seed has been planted, the technology exists, and that's actually going to be the most transformative over time.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I think, like, generally speaking, AWS made like a couple of really, really big sort of bold moves with all of this, right? By with AWS, and also now extending.
Homie Matt Y, that guy
Yeah,
right there.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and to your point, sort of adjacent topic on tech companies are now like so getting used to copying each other, and I think I'm just like looking at AI, right? One company introduced like deep research. Others like introduce exactly the same feature in some sort of variation. Anyways, go back to like
today's differentiation is tomorrow's feature parity, right? Like that's the innovate or die, right? It's the dilemma of the builder of the, like that's just what happens, right? It may not be built the exact same way, but you're always trying to, to some degree copycat or change the differentiation landscape, and then obviously leapfrog it into doing something novel or something unique in a different way or solving a different problem.
Yeah. So let's talk about Flywheel, because I think I guess it's like, first of all, you are in a unique position to talk about that because you've been in this motion, right, in marketplaces for years now, right? Like for how many? Like 7 years?
6, 7 years, yeah.
Right. So do you think marketplaces kind of build like internal flywheel? Like, can you talk about adoption? What do you see maybe anecdotally across like your community, your personal experience, and so on?
I think there's a couple the sides to that coin, right? Which is there's what the cloud providers want, which is you to list in the marketplace and sell in the marketplace, and there's obviously data and benefits to that. And I think there's a mismatch sometimes of expectations between the ISV and the cloud provider, and maybe sometimes between the cloud provider and the buyer. But for the most part, what I always, the way I think about it is if I'm a startup and I've been at a startup where we didn't have marketplace at all, well, the trigger for me to even think and consider why this was at Lacework, right? Why should we even accept marketplace? It was pretty simple. Our customers were asking us. So it wasn't like I had this grand, like, oh, AWS is telling me to do this. No, our customers started to say, hey, can I buy your solution through the marketplace? And the answer at the time was no, which simply means to the person who's supposed to own that, like, I better go figure out what this is, why people want to buy that way, what do we need to do, how do we need to do it, and then obviously like build this as part of the process. And then over time, then I had to figure out, well, how do I communicate this to my sales team? How do I communicate this to my CFO and the finance team? How do we communicate this, and what do we need to do to RevOps and operations? And because marketplace touches money, it's really, really important, but it's also very complicated. So I know we'll have topics and we'll talk about the person who's running the partnerships, but this is one of those things where I think marketplace, just like a retail business that accepts cash only, Like this expands the net. It allows for you to accept the AWS credit card, or I call it the Google or the Microsoft credit card. Now, there's the conditions for where you're built, what the rules of engagement are. But I would always say, like for a merchant, the more you can accept Visa and Amex and Discover and Apple Pay, like the more you can just say yes, the easier it is to open that net, make your sellers have to objection handle less or say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. So I think of these forms of payment as really important, but you also have to be pretty selfish as an ISV. This has to make sense to you. And then there's a lot of benefits that I say in that being selfish, there's a lot of benefits. I'll give you a very simple example. At Lacework, we sold to a lot of startups. And startups, what maybe people know or don't know, a lot of startups pay their AWS bill with a credit card. Awesome. They pay all their AWS bill. So we would sell to a startup, and the startup would want a couple different things from us. Whether we wanted to do it, yes or no, that's part of the negotiation. But they would want us to say, hey, that $120K a year, invoice, can we pay it over 12 months? Maybe yes or no, different companies handle that differently. But second is that startup would want to pay their bill via credit card, which is how they're paying their AWS. And for an ISV like us to set that up, sure, we could do it, right? I could have used Stripe. There's a bunch of, you could build that in, but I'm telling you, the 3% that you mentioned, it's cheaper than most of those other routes to market. Amex merchant fees are more than 3% in general. A lot of credit cards with these fancy benefits, their merchant fees are pretty expensive. There's transaction costs. So imagine your business and your ideal customer profile is selling to a bunch of startups. Well, it's much easier. I don't have to think about PCI DSS. I can handle credit card payments. I can have that facility come straight through the marketplace. It's actually a cheaper route to market than if I set up my own Stripe or credit card processing portals. If I'm taking credit cards and hard coding things, newsflash, got to store that data. There's PCI DSS. It's not easy on a business. And then the second piece to that is a feature like FPS, flexible payment schedulers, made it very easy where it's like, hey, we don't always want to do, we'd like that 120 grand up front. We don't really want, but let's just say in the negotiation, one of the tactics was, okay, we'll do that because most CFOs and most revenue leaders will take $1 over $0. So if you're about to lose that deal, you're happy to take 12 payments of $10,000 a month versus no deal at all. And so while that might not be your preferred like purchasing or invoice, to each their own, you're negotiating this is another. And I haven't even talked about PLG or product-led growth, but I think in that respect, that's just one little example of why marketplace and why this, even for a experience we had, a line of business, how that made sense to the financial side of the business, the revenue side of the business, for sure.
No, 100%. And I agree. This also makes things much easier from CFO perspective of of your company, because AWS or the hyperscaler essentially takes care of all the payments and make sure that everything goes through. And so it makes
very early on, like we have 100 customers. When we have 1,000 or 10,000, you really want to be chasing payments. How big do you want your collections and revenue team to be? Like it could be cost avoidance as well as you factor in needing to scale your collections team with the scale of your business.
Right. 100%. So to what you just mentioned, I guess we did the research and we asked why you're on marketplace, right? And then customer preference, essentially customers are saying, hey, I want you to buy on marketplace, and therefore, cross-sell is number two, and we'll talk about that in a second. So let's talk about PLG, right? And I think before we talk about PLG, I guess other interesting kind of insight that came from this research, we asked another difficult question is are you getting net new revenue on marketplace, or is it just a channel shift, right? Because it's all, in our course, we have a lot of people asking this question. So 63% saying that they see net new revenue in some sort of ways, so which is great. But historically, marketplaces, at least in the last couple of years, they've been evolving with private offers, right? Which is big enterprise contracts, sent through marketplace, because of cloud commitments and other benefits and consolidation and other things which we just discussed. I think now more and more attention of hyperscalers are towards PLG, which is product-led growth. How do you get traction on marketplaces? And I guess curious, like what you've seen so far, and then I have a lot of ideas to talk about.
Couple different experiences for sure with both ISVs. And then obviously, like you said, we started PCAN.cloud, like Partner Cloud Alliance Network. So hundreds of us talk about this subject all the time. So I've been able to kind of learn, through others and also just my own personal experiences as kind of an operator. But the one thing I'll go back. I've been around partnerships and channels and all of that stuff in software for, over, I don't even know how old I am anymore. It's a couple decades, right? So, but what I've always realized is there's like, for a traditional ISV or software company, there's probably like 7 or 8 routes to market you can take, right? I mean, direct is certainly one, but if you think about an indirect route, there's a bunch of routes to market, and each one of those routes come with similar or different outcomes, and each of those outcomes have different cost structures too, right? What you have to give in order to get. So let's table that. What I have found is probably having a balance of experiences in business and technical kind of is why I've seen, and I don't always think about the partner that I'm working with. I'm kind of going back up higher. What's my executive leadership team thinking about? What's the CEO and the CXO thinking about? What are our strategic business priorities for this year or the next 3 to 5 years? And then the thing about the cloud partnerships is most partnerships tend to be pretty vertical. The cloud partnerships tends to be pretty horizontal. It depends on your business, but you can imagine I'm built on this thing, I'm selling with this thing, I'm building with this thing, I'm transacting, fulfilling, marketplace with this thing. I'm getting gifts that I call, but things like credits and marketing funds and resources. And now I'm building pipeline from this thing. It's pretty wide. I don't know how many CXOs most businesses have, but I guarantee it's touching every single one of them in some way. And what I have found, not to avoid the question, is if done right, this thing is the horizontal thing that appeals to all the parts of the business, not always. It's more of a strategic relationship than it is necessarily a channel. That's why I get this adverse reaction when someone says, oh, my channel with AWS, right? Like if I know where they're coming from, but I think it's the wrong way to think about them.
Yeah, just like to quickly interject, I guess if you look at even at the size of these companies, this is like a multi-trillion-dollar companies. It's like almost like a state level enterprises, right? It's like,
Yeah, and look, like any partnership, I remember I use partnership and then I call it friendship because it's easy to go back to Amazon and AWS, and I go back to like business partnerships with my own best friends or my own, you and I being friends, stuff like that, right? It takes a little bit of work. It takes time to build the trust, but let me not avoid the question. PLG, product-led growth. This is a different subject. It depends on your business. It also depends what's built. Now, if you're a startup building your first product and you have this vision in your business case, how do you want to sell this? What's your route to market? What does your technology do, right? PLG, in my opinion, just kind of came from B2C. Most of the apps on my phone, the consumer stuff was like, there isn't a sales rep calling me and cold calling. Like that's not, it's viral in the sense that like I kind of click a couple buttons, I get it on the app store, I pay for it on a monthly, like that's where the enterprise software is kind of getting that, you're seeing that kind of behavior. But remember, to do that correctly, it has to be from the CTO, it has to be really in the product. And so at Lacework, 2 things are true. Number one, it was security. So our ultimate buyer is the CISO. Like there isn't a lot of trust established. You're not going to find security folks just like, oh, let me go try something and connect it to my production AWS environment, maybe my test environment. But the point is like in security, PLG is a kind of a tough pill to swallow. Also, there's partners and there's, direct seller. That market doesn't exactly lend itself very well to just like immediate trust. Let me try before I buy. Right. So you got that dealing with it. The second is if your product wasn't really built that way, it's an enterprise product, maybe you sell it with professional services, it takes a little bit of time to implement. That's not exactly, you want your customers on their own self-guided experience, playing with your UI, trying to get it to work. They're likely to get frustrated. And then you've just taken that sale and you've completely demolished the perception in that sale from your business. But if you are leaning into this is something that you wanted to build, or you're building day one, or you're building later, for whatever the why is in your business, usually your product is like, well, where can I get distribution to that? The natural thing is you go to my website, you see what we do, whatever, you click a button, you try for free, or you try for like a freemium forever. I'm not a fan of that, but like you have some kind of call to action. And then what do? Click a couple buttons, you spin up an environment, and you're off to the races. Now, hopefully your product is also suited that like a consumer app, it's like, click here, connect your account, do this, right? Those are all software decisions. That's not maybe how your product worked out of the gates before. So all of these things you have to kind of be like committed to this thing. Now the question is, and here at Lacework, we slowly added something, and it turns out me and my fantastic team, mostly my fantastic team, built our PLG motion. But we didn't really do it like a full, here's all of Lacework and all of that. We actually just took what we could and built a really simple assessment. You can imagine it was pretty fast to deploy a couple parts of our solution. It was a very guided experience to connect it to your test environment and maybe your production environment. Couple clicks, couple minutes, boom, you get an answer that says, hey, on a score of 1 to 100, here's kind of how risky you are. Like that was just a very small segment of the product, but we were able to package that up. We were able to give that both to the marketplace and to our partners for free and say, hey, go do these, create leads, right? Now, Astronomer, totally different situation. We already had from day one open source and Apache Airflow, which is all free all the time. Astro, our SaaS version, had free, but you had to go to our website to get it. Or at the time, we were also doing it with Azure. But we weren't doing it with AWS and we weren't doing it with Google. And I just look at that like, oh, cool. We decided to accept Visa, but why aren't we accepting like Amex and Discover? Like some people prefer to use those payments. By the way, we're doing private offers across all three, but we weren't doing pay as you go. We weren't doing so, right? Like two things happen. I'll just talk about AWS. One is awesome. Why are we doing that? Right? No one really knew how. We had a listing, we were transacting on it. So there's a couple ways you could do super listing. We just created a second listing. That one was our kind of enterprise we used for private offers. The other was our pay-go. And the reasons behind the scenes for APIs and automation, sometimes that makes more sense. Also, just like delineating there's a million reasons we can get into. But two things are true. AWS has a fantastic program called Seller Prime. Hats off to Vinod. By unlocking that pay-go listing, by wiring what we were doing on our website with Stripe and our credit cards, we just tied back into the marketplace. And that program did two things, and it's a public program now. Number one, it came with a whole bunch of MDF, like tens of thousands of dollars. So imagine now it's like, hey, not only are we going to go do this, which we should have done anyway for free, because we wanted to widen the net, but second, AWS is going to help us double our marketing budgets by promoting this and driving this as a new channel, as a new revenue fulfillment source. The second thing is it also opened telemetry. You can't always see who's hitting your marketplace. You can't really use it the same way you would use your website, right? And all the telemetry you'd have in Google Analytics or whatever you're using for kind of that metrics. That program also unlocks a bunch of analytics as well. That's a neat feature as well. So between me running partnerships in cloud and my marketing team, my CMO, that was actually pretty cool. There wasn't that much work. It fit our business. It fit our strategy. Our CMO owns PLG revenue. Our CRO owns like direct sales channel, indirect revenue. But everyone owns revenue. Everyone cares about that and customer outcomes. But like you could see with the CMO, the good news is we had a few people, had a couple help from the product people, and it wasn't a lot of work, but it unlocked a bunch of things. And so now you got tens of thousands of dollars to go promote and market. And it's not like we needed to say, oh, only buy us in the marketplace and all of that. We just needed our call to actions for all of this marketing activity to be like, you can buy us on the marketplace. And the same with the buy with on our website. And then again, we started talking about could we do this in our PLG? Maybe you started with your 14-day free trial and we got you in through the marketplace. Well, when you go to pay, we're giving you a private offer, and technically we're pay as you go behind the scenes. So you're just paying monthly. But what if we wanted to give you a small discount to commit you to a monthly contract? Couldn't we do that all from the product? Why do we need a sales rep chasing you and asking these questions? We can lower our cost of sales with a certain subset of customers. So I would say the biggest book of our business was always the sales generated leads, all that stuff, our big enterprise deals. But PLG became a drip system. So I won't get into money, but it was, over, not, over a little less than 7 figures of people that started in the marketplace, and then we converted them into annualized contracts or a higher greater service. Because we also had 3 tiers of product, and our marketplace listing only had the developer tier, kind of the free tier, and we sold 2 other tiers beyond that. The second thing we did was we unlocked the developer tier with the teams tier. So now you can go pay as you go directly onto the marketplace and buy, the kind of small tier that didn't offer support, and then the second tier that offered support, maybe not all the features, right? And then when we sold business or enterprise, the greater tiers, obviously you were engaged with us. Usually there was a sales process or a commitment of deal, but also you get discounts too, right? We didn't offer a ton of discounts, but you had the ability to kind of fit, talk to us, fit, I need this, maybe I don't need these things, you could value-based sell. So very long answer, but the answer is I've seen it where we didn't have it and we wanted to get to that direction. And I've also seen it where we had it, but it wasn't totally wired up. But I can tell you, we did get net new business that way, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's a journey. But also, we also saw this committing where it's that revenue would start in this bucket, pay go, and then we'd move it over to contractual based revenue as well. So there's a few angles there.
Yeah, 100%. I guess what I really loved. First of all, thank you for great sort of case study almost. What I loved how strategically you kind of integrated this pay as you go strategy across the entire sort of product and marketing and sales. One thing that you just highlighted, I think not that many people kind of understand, is that even if you succeed in pay as you go, you still need to bridge that with enterprise sales if you want to unlock a big numbers, right?
Yeah, big enterprise customers don't always buy that way today. They might start that way, but they may not buy that way. But also, I can tell you, we had Fortune 500 companies that started that way and wanted to stay that way. They didn't want to commit. They just wanted to be able to unplug at any time. But you'd see them spending 10, 20, 30 grand a month on our pay go. And they're yeah, checks our box, team's happy. It's in this group. The case study for this, MongoDB, I saw in one of your things, their revenue and how they're talking about their commits and some of that stuff. But, that Seller Prime program I was talking about, that's who incubated it with AWS. They've done a really, really good job figuring out, letting people get it, distributing it, coming this way, that way. And what would happen a lot of times is you go this enterprise has 10 pockets of MongoDB somewhere. Let's go talk to them strategically. Let's get higher and let's talk about a tactical deal. That's another way. It's kind of planting this at the develop. So if you're selling to developers, it depends what you do. All of these programs, you don't just read it oh, this is for me and all these metrics apply to me. You have to apply them to your business and just kind of understand your why and your business and where you're going and what you want. And then you map back these facilities that the cloud providers offer you.
before we dig deeper into PLG, I guess like one of the questions that I have as you talk about that, like the importance, maybe you would just walk us through the importance of plugging into all this kind of new and not new cloud programs, right? Which can kind of elevate your stature, especially with AI. I think there's a lot of like programs right now that are super strategic. Can you talk about that in kind of in context of like getting traction on marketplaces?
Hard to answer that specifically without, context. However, look, AWS, Google, Microsoft, they all do fairly good jobs, on their websites showing you, I'll pick on AWS, like I've got a software path and I've got a, consulting the solution path. And like based on these paths, here's a bunch of things that you can do, all their public stuff. The private stuff, usually it's being incubated. So someone might ask me, like, why do you want to be a top partner at AWS? Like, look, newsflash, like when they like you and trust you, they kind of pilot things with you. So, a few months ago, random, Azure comes to us and saying, hey, we're trying to like go target our SMB business, and we were looking for solutions that had a PLG strategy, whatever. So look, I saw it with my own eyes. Microsoft picked 8 vendors to go spend money promoting. So I'm looking at Microsoft ads on Bing or whatever, highlighting Astronomer, and they're driving hundreds of thousands of impressions for us. Now we're looking at conversions and all of that other stuff as we step through, but I just took a step back and I was like, I can't believe Microsoft is spending money highlighting my technology, and they just sent a notification out to thousands of their SMB customers, like, this is one of our partners, check them out. And I was like, look, the ROI on that is invaluable. I'm not trying to measure that, but like that's a great example that like why you want to be partners is because you get to experiment with them. Even the Seller Prime program at Lacework, I knew about it. We just didn't have a PLG motion, so I couldn't get into it. But the second I moved to Astronomer, I was like, oh, we got a partnership. Boom, go right back into that program. So I think the closer you are to the program owners, there's the public stuff. And I'd always say start there, right? Competencies and, all of the ready programs and all the other things that the APN offers, these credit things, these MDF things, like, yeah, figure that stuff out. It's literally gifts from the cloud provider. And unlike most other routes to market, you're paying for this stuff with the fact that you're a partner and my consumption is on their cloud. It's very different than giving away margin at the revenue at the deal side. And that's an interesting dynamic. So point is like that stuff is out there. As you get a PDR or a PDM in AWS's language, like those are the kind of things you're asking your partner development manager about, and they should be bringing you these kind of programs. And then, in the 60 framework that I've built, I talked to your training cohort a little bit about that stuff as well. The 6C is for community. And so I've been doing marketplace for, 6 years, but I said it was 13 years old. So what was happening in those years before I even knew that this thing exists? Well, newsflash, I went and asked all the people, Snowflake, CrowdStrike, like I went and asked all of them what was going on. Also, they're in my community, so I would get access to them all the time, and they would share their knowledge with others as well. The thing I found 7 years ago, nobody shared knowledge or experience. There was no blueprint you could follow. There was no, manual that was like step 1, step 2. And so part of me both wanting to learn myself, applying it at my situation, but then also like unlocking it for others was just kind of creating these communities where friends help friends. Right. But that's how I had to learn, right? Why would you do this? Who was doing it well? Who was already transacting? Remember, it wasn't like one day CrowdStrike went from $0 a year to $1 billion a year. It's iterative, it's journey, it's top-down commitment to this process. And they've got channel partners, they've got distribution.
We'll talk about channel partners in a second.
Yeah.
So, and CrowdStrike as well, because I think CrowdStrike is interesting. But just to kind of talk about a little bit deeper on PLG, right? A lot of people think like PLG is like essentially you kind of list on marketplace and things start to happen automatically. And all like somehow cloud providers do their magic. And then all of a sudden there's a flood of customers and they kind of rob on your product and you'll get some revenue. And I was thinking like what
By the way, anyone who hears that and believes that, I've got like beachfront property in like Arizona to sell you. Like, this is the hard part. It's like the magic beanstalk or the magic beans, right? Like just anything you hear, any stat you read, any report you read, just like believe it, but it's situational, right? Don't just rush into it.
Verify, yes. No, I agree. I guess there's a lot of like individual kind of differences between companies and so on. But I was like chatting with someone on LinkedIn with one of our alumni, and we're thinking like how I was listening to AWS kind of webinar to customers, and I was thinking like backwards, what are the ways as ISVs can actually kind of broaden the funnel, highlight the visibility across different programs, right? Because I think there's like a, in AWS, for example, there's a 20 plus.
Think of it like your website. There's a whole SEO for all these listings.
No, exactly. I think this is one. I think free trials, in addition to PLG, is the big one. I guess reviews and social proof will become more and more critical.
I mean, with AWS, there's things like vendor insights, which is security and compliance stuff. With
yes.
With Microsoft, we were part of a program called Native ISV. There was 11 partners that had almost first-party experiences to a native AWS service. You can go into the Azure console, search for Airflow, search for Astronomer, and you literally 3 clicks, you're connected, and boom, you're off to the races in Azure. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and then I was trying to kind of think a little bit kind of longer term. I guess if we like make parallels with B2C, right? We'll probably have some ads and sponsored and everything else kind of longer term. But I'm curious, like, what are the things that you've seen that, in addition to what you described, that you as an ISV can do to make this kind of organic traction happen more?
I'll tell you, I mean, I've got examples of stuff I've done and stuff that I probably shouldn't have done, but I did anyway. But I thought like I'm no expert in SEO or, search, but I just thought of it the same way. If there's a marketplace of buyers coming to us.
So you have an MBA in marketing, right?
No, but it's one of the subjects we learned. No, it was an entrepreneurship, right? So, and you get to know, I mean, you know this.
Even better, I guess, like,
you get to wear all the hats, right? But as I was talking horizontally, like I'll just give you an anecdote. Why does anyone do any indirect business? Why would a CEO want to partner with AWS or a channel? It's obviously for, well, if I'm friends with them and they got like, I don't know, 2 to 4 million customers, maybe they're going to give me some of their customers, right? Maybe the buyers on the marketplace are magically going to find my product and buy it like they do on Amazon.com. Like that's the expectation, the belief. That's not the reality. But the gap between those two things, in my opinion, is marketing and positioning. So while I'm not a marketer, the marketing team, the CMO, are my best friends. Because the second the chief revenue officer wants me to generate leads and source business, I think about what are the gifts and access I can get? What can I do? How do I go partner with marketing to go generate that pipeline? And then how do I bring that back through the funnel of co-sell, marketplace, and everything else to transact revenue? It's really, really hard. You kind of mentioned it, and I use that tree analogy, planting a seed, and people forget about that. It's like, oh, I bought this seedling from Home Depot and I planted it in my backyard, and then I watered it that day and fertilized it and tended the soil. And then 6 months later, I didn't water it at all. I didn't do sprinkler, nothing. Well, you're not getting apples. These are journeys. These are partnerships. This isn't put in $1, get out $2. Like They will generate stuff, but you have to build it just like a business. And so marketing is one of those engines that, in my opinion, can create that. The fact that a seller, I helped them here, they're going to walk me into another account, that just takes a lot of time and trust, right? It doesn't mean that it's not possible. I've seen the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but it took a lot of time, a lot of pipeline, a lot of marketplace revenue, and a lot of trust and education and knowledge. That flywheel just takes time, like any best friend. You weren't immediately best friends with your best friend. You met, you were into common stuff, you hung out together, you talked, and over time you developed this relationship. And then that best friend will help you almost do anything for you. This is no different in business. So the PLG and the marketing and the SEO stuff, I just think about it. If I'm a buyer and I'm searching on the website or whatever, it's probably not going to happen. But all of those little features or telemetries, I mentioned vendor insight, I mentioned the built on AWS. These are all tags. Amazon's, they're not a search engine, but they run a marketplace. Clearly, the more bells and whistles and buttons I push and filters that I have, it's probably in their algorithms that can help me. Also, no surprise, you can go to AWS's website. They have best practices on marketplace. I've asked PDMs for feedback. I've asked other people in the marketplace, like, hey, can you do a quick analysis on my marketplace listing and tell me what I'm missing or what should I be doing? And then I'll go to CrowdStrike's page. I'll go to Mongo's page. Like, I'll go look and see what they're doing, and I'll steal stuff from them too. Oh, that's good. I didn't even think of that. Right. Also, you can, most people don't realize, you can upload assets, you can upload videos, you can upload keywords behind your listing for what people are searching for. This is no different than SEO.
Yeah, and in fact, actually, in last reInvent, I think there was a session where they specifically highlighted a few things. One of them was like, in big ways, like SEO. So you not only should optimize for internally for AWS Marketplace, but you also should optimize for Google, right? Which is Perplexity now or something.
Search for any search engine. Search for your company keywords. It'll take you right to the marketplace is a listing. People will find you that way too.
Yeah. And then also they highlighted like free trials and also conversion into pay-as-you-go and so on.
That part is just like, don't swallow the pill without figuring out what's in it. PLG is not for every business. Free trials may not be for every business. I would argue that these are things that you should do, but you might not be ready for it today. That might not make sense with your buyer today. But over time, I think these are things that you slowly unlock. Lacework was a perfect example. 4 years it took to kind of unlock our, call it free trial PLG. And it didn't come out of the product team. The product team helped. The engineering team helped. But literally, my awesome SA team, we led that thing and created it.
Michael, that's like super insightful. I guess we have so many questions, to be honest, and we'll definitely do a round two, and we'll talk about channel partners and everything else. Maybe to wrap this up, and the things that you are most excited about marketplaces in the next, let's say, half a year.
So first off, thank you for having me. Like I said, join the community. I'm a regular guest on Roman's cohorts of education, so that you can keep getting bits and drips of this stuff. And thank you for putting out the content. I mean, if I just had to whittle it down, I think I don't know what the outcomes are, but like the feature I talked about, really the buy with the marketplace stuff, the marketplace APIs, that I think that's a real game changer. That's something that I think AWS has been thinking about for a long time, but they weren't there. And I will just say, most of AWS's services are known to be like API first, build. Marketplace wasn't. It was like, here's what it does, here's how you interact with it. And there wasn't a lot of that. And the teams kind of flipped that. And I think this is the first visibility and iteration of that. And then again, extending it to like non-AWS built services. It's to be determined what the value is, what the market penetration and the traction is going to be. But I think that's interesting. You can build your business strategy. You could do some stuff. Ultimately, business is simple. Create a product that helps customers generate revenue. Then I have costs in the business. And at the bottom of the thing is what I actually get to put in my pocket, invest, hire more, whatever else. And so like, if you can have this partnership touch revenue or touch costs in some way, like that's better for the bottom line. So it's that simple.
No, amazing. And I think like I wanted to underscore how holistically you think about these partnerships, right? So you don't think like, hey, here's a PLG, or like here's
Don't
like
get
a
trapped.
sort of like a private offers, or like here's like a marketing thing. You kind of think like, how do I integrate that? And I think this is like a really, really good insight. So look, Michael, thank you so much. I think we'll definitely do round two. Thank you for
Happy to-
now, and looking forward for the next time.
Sounds good. Happy to chat.